Are we man-spreading enough? No, right? I mean, that's the silly thing. Anyway, let's talk about UBI for a minute, man. So universal basic income.
Because we have a global audience too, so we should make sure everybody knows what that is. Because I don't even know if there's so many countries probably don't even know what the fuck that is.
No, probably don't. So universal basic income is this notion that, and this ties in with the conversation we were having in episode 1. You know, that I did a comic book series about this thing that I call the transition tribulation, and it's basically this notion that, you know, I believe that the Reader's Digest version is that the war of the future is between fast-moving technology and slow-moving governments. You know, and that there is going to be a transition period at some point. I mean, whatever happens towards the tail end of all of this technological upheaval and rapid change that we're going through, I believe that there's an unavoidable transition period where governments are not going to be able to deal with the social consequences of technological change. And one of the very obvious manifestations of this is automation laying off jobs. Okay, and so was it you mentioning earlier today that, you know, people were talking about truckers, how it was like, so how many million truckers were going to lose their jobs?
Well, there's 3.1 million of them.
3.1 million in the U.S.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and those guys are probably, you know, first on the chopping block because, you know, now we have these automated, you know, robotized, AI-driven trucks that are going to be on the road, self-driving trucks.
They're getting there, and there's talks that like they'll do the highways, and then when they get to the urban areas, then actual drivers take, and then on the highways they'll have there'll be one man for every 5 trucks in an office looking at 5 screens and kind of making sure that those are going well. So all the jobs may not go, but the vast majority of them will.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one of the things that Jacques Fresco and I were talking about when he and I first met, and this is long before Jacques Fresco got, you know, famous because of the Zeitgeist movies. But, you know, we were talking about how, you know, there is going to be a period where, you know, we aren't going to know what to do, right? I mean, automation is going to lay out. That's one of the clear things. What is going to happen with those 3.1 million dudes?
Okay, so what's the? I get where you're going. My first question is what. Like. Okay, what are they going to do, and how are they going to react? Of course, because like the first argument is like, well, what's like they're going to like just get other jobs. Like, okay, so the idea that technology creates a whole bunch of other jobs, and every time this has happened in the past, we've seen that more jobs that we can't even begin to think of are created. Yeah. But is that really true? And especially in this like the low skill level. I'm not saying trucking is an easy job. I'm just saying in the not needing higher education jobs, like those people are not going to go get higher education. They're not going to all of a sudden just become star pupils and then become software engineers. Like when you automate all these jobs out, and the argument is that, well, we always create new ones we never even thought of. Is that a possibility for the unskilled? Because
I don't know. Okay, I'll give you 3 lenses through which you could look at this, right? I'll give you Bucky Fuller's lens, I'll give you my lens, and I'll give you Jacques Fresco's lens, right? And this was one of the things that Jacques and I used to talk about. So Bucky Fuller had this really interesting notion, and he said that the notion that everybody in society has to be productive is bunk, right? And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And he was predicting a lot of what's happening now. You know, that through technological advancements, much of the drudgery that we must go through to survive is going to be made obsolete. So, you know, we can eventually evolve into a society where everything that you need to survive is taken care of through automation. And once we are at that golden sweet spot, okay, that brings us to a whole other level, right? So, okay, so let's say what Bucky's talking about is realized, right? Now, my problem with this, and this is where I disagreed, you know, very, very strongly with Jacques. He and I had very strong disagreements on a couple of fronts, right? My thing was, okay, if people don't have anything to work for, right, we're going to have a rising leisure class that is going to create all kinds of problems in the world, right? Because they're going to create problems that don't exist because they're bored out of their minds and they don't have any purpose. So my solution was, I said, look, we need to create a luxury-based economy, right? So I thought, look, to stem the tide of this, maybe we have to do something like UBI, like universal basic income, where we take care of everybody. That would be, and through Keynesian economics, we can do this. It devalues the dollar in the process, but It's a way for the slow-moving government to address this, rapidly approaching problem. I mean, this is within 10 years. This is going to be an enormous frickin' problem. The Democratic presidential candidates are talking about it now. It is going to be, in the next election, it's not just going to be like on the horizon shit. It's going to be like, we're dealing with it. We're in it. That's my prediction. So I said, if we have a luxury-based economy, we could tell everybody, hey, look, if you want to just exist, we're going to help, provide for you, and you can just exist. But if you want to, participate in the luxury economy, you got to get in and you got to do something. You got to create something. Now, Jacques' argument was that we need to create what is called a resource-based economy, right? And that is that, everybody in the world can have everything they want, right? And my question was, well, Jacques, what do you do about the rising leisure class? And he said, well, through social engineering, you teach people not to be lazy.
Sounds like socialism to me.
Well, but it's a technocratic socialism, which is slightly different, right? Remember, I think that, socialism and capitalism as you know it now, this is like last century's conversation. Technology changes the dynamics of this stuff so much. So that, yeah, I mean, socialism with 20th century technology proved every time to be pretty catastrophic and murderous, right? But, maybe we have to have something like that, with, the technocratic society that we are evolving into.
How would you define technocratic?
Well, technocratic, in the sense I'm using it, I have to thank you for saying that, because there were technocrats, and we have to distinguish what I'm saying from them, right? And I'm not talking about the early 20th century people who labeled themselves as technocrats, right? But I mean, a world where technology is providing for all the basic human needs for people, right? And that's possible. Bucky predicted that. Jacques was talking about that. I was talking about that. But I don't believe that Jacques' answer of we should just use social engineering to train people to not be lazy was like, we'll train them to be artists and scientists, and we create a culture where there were those things are revered. And I'm like, hey, I love that notion. I mean, I think it's a noble, beautiful idea, right? But I don't know if that's possible. Like, I mean, you're predicting human behavior based on dynamics that we've never observed before.
I understand the beauty of the thought, but it sounds utopian-ish to me, and human behavior proves otherwise. Like, at some point, like, see, when I say socialism too, because you're right, it's such a mixture now, and there's so many things that can, like, when I'm thinking, who do you have to force to make that happen?
Right.
Like, human choice has to be lowered in order for that to. Everyone has to agree upon that, and not everyone's going to agree upon that.
See, Jacques' vision. If you go to the Venus Project website, which is Jacques passed away a few years ago. Sadly, he got to over 100 years old, and he stayed super active, until his last days too. And I got to contact Roxanne. Roxanne was his lover, who was with him. Much younger lover. Wonderful woman, by the way. I need to check in on her and see how she's doing. But and if you look at their website and you see what their vision was, it was that everything is provided by automation, right? And that is possible. I mean, we can actually get to a point. I mean, we're close to having the technology to do that now. It's just a matter of getting the technology perfected and out there.
Right, but you'd have to like see what, and I feel like and I have to look at it further. I'm just making very sweeping generalizations.
No, dude, and your questions are right on. I mean, these are the right questions to ask.
But immediately I'm thinking, you have to eliminate human greed.
That's another thing.
Like, who's going to want to give that up?
He thinks so. His idea was that through cultural and social engineering,
which sounds like brainwashing and propaganda. And I mean, even if it's for a good
one could argue that's happening regardless. That's always going to happen, right?
Right?
Like, we're always getting brainwashed in one direction or another.
Right.
I mean, you and I are under a certain type of brainwashing, right? I mean, everybody is, right?
But like, core human traits, can they be brainwashed out?
Very good question.
Right.
I don't know.
Like self-interest. Because sounds like that's kind of like what would have to be kind of mitigated at one, or at least temporarily on hold in order to get this economy going, at least.
See, it's funny you bring that up, because that was the source of the primary disagreement that Jacques and I had. Like, we even got into it was a very funny scene in this restaurant where it was like Jacques, Roxanne, and
you didn't put him in a headlock or anything.
Yeah, that's
put
right,
him in an
90-year-old
armbar?
man. Yeah.
Give up.
Just keep more at his ass, his 90-year-old ass. No. But we were like really raising our voice at each other, and people were like looking at me like I'm some horrible man,
right?
Because like I'm yelling.
How do you yell at your grandfather?
Yeah,
because he forgot that he already put butter on his steak. You're such an asshole.
Well, I mean, it was mutual, but I mean, it wasn't. But we still loved each other. You know, I mean, we were just like having a heated argument about it. But anyway, what we were arguing about was he believed that there should be this central computer that controls all this stuff, and I was like,
shit.
And I'm like, Jacques, so how are you going to make sure that there's not somebody tinkering with the source code so that they get more of the goodies? You know, I mean, how do you know about that? And he didn't really have a good answer for it. And I was like, well, dude, you gotta solve that for your system.
That's central planning at the.
He just kind of explained it away.
Central planning at the like you see it all just kind of loops
exactly.
It would be this is the problem that I have with so much of this stuff is like it would be nice, yes, if I would if only people could be.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it'd be so much better if people were. Like those kind of statements, it's like, yeah, but they're fucking not. And it's not just because we're because there's a certain level of we can be brainwashed and we can think differently, but on another level, history has shown like wiped out civilizations, and civilizations before have shown that we are human beings, and like the link between, I know postmodern thought is like you can't link fucking ape shit to us anymore, but like there's very clear instincts inside of us that don't go away.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of this utopian stuff is like, it's the thought of it, and some of it can maybe take us to a new level. But like, people think that you can revolutionize the fucking whole human instinct and evolution. You can override that in one generation.